Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Mike. You guys are rocking with me and Mike's Intellectual Corner. On today's episode, we are diving back into our History Matters content. This is why did Sweden support the Vietcong during the Vietcong War, or the Vietnam War? And without further ado, we're just going to dive right back into it.
When most people think of the Vietcong and their allies, Sweden doesn't often make the list. Yet throughout the Vietnam War, Sweden was a supporter of theirs and harshly critical of the United States. Which raises the question, why? Why did Sweden side with the Vietcong? So, during the Cold War, Sweden aimed for a policy of non-alliance in peace, neutrality in war. That is, they weren't picking sides. However, throughout most of this period, it was pretty clear that Sweden lent much more towards the NATO camp than that of the Warsaw Pact. Yet, there were many issues in which Sweden was consistent in its criticism of the USA and the West, and one such issue was the Vietnam War. The Vietnam War had two phases. The first was when France, the colonial overlord of this area called French Indochina, fought to quell a rebellion against its rule. Now, at first, the USA wasn't all too fussed about this since it had no desire to preserve old European empires, but with Vietnam, there was an issue. Because in peace talks, it was divided into two states, and North Vietnam was under the control of communists and they wanted the South too. And as such, it was intervention time. Because domino theory dictated that all instances of a potential communist government must be stopped lest the entire world fall to it. So in the mid-1960s, Sweden pushed itself as an international mediator and spent 3 years trying to get the USA and North Vietnam to make peace. This effort came to an abrupt stop in 1968 when American President Lyndon B. Johnson told Sweden to mind its own business. The next year, Olof Palme was elected as Swedish Prime Minister and his attitude towards the Vietnam War was much more hostile. You should know that he was a firm
I mean, in reality though, they're right. The war was freaking ridiculous. It was just a waste of our manpower and our resources. And if anything, it reverted from what actually needed to be done here in actual America, which was obviously the Civil Rights Act and all that stuff like that. It was just diverting from what needed to be done. But yeah.
And his attitude towards the Vietnam War was much more hostile. You should know that he was a firm critic of many foreign nations at this point, so the USA wasn't being specifically targeted. However, he was extremely public with his critiques, such as when in 1972 he compared the US bombing campaigns in Vietnam to Germany's use of concentration camps in World War II. And in response, the United States promptly broke off diplomatic relations with Sweden until the next year. So Sweden's support for North Vietnam and the Vietcong was because Palme and the rest of the Swedish government saw US intervention as ignoring the will of the people there.
Well then, but isn't that kind of like ignoring what they might want? Because obviously the South wants, but the South doesn't want, what the North wants. So by you, getting on the South or being on the North side, you're kind of, undermining what the South wants. So why, in my opinion, it would have been better just to be neutral on it, because then you could have been, but still be on the side of the entire Vietnam country, not just the North. I don't know.
Saw US intervention as ignoring the will of the people there, thus making it an act of imperialism. Now, Palme wasn't a communist or anything and was mostly driven by a fierce anti-war ideology. These criticisms ultimately changed nothing, and so Palme opted to give direct aid to the Vietcong. Now, obviously, this didn't include sending a bunch of Swedish soldiers to Vietnam in order to fight the Americans or anything. What Sweden did was skirt as close to helping as they could without drawing the wrath of NATO. And the first thing that Palme did was to give asylum to American draft dodgers. The second thing Sweden did was to send medical supplies to Vietnam along with doctors to train Vietcong medics. Outside of the government, many Swedes were fiercely pro-Vietcong, and there was even an attempt by members of the public to send money to North Vietnam to acquire weapons. In the end, Sweden's support for the Vietcong was more focused on its opposition to America's war against it. Whilst the government did recognise North Vietnam as an independent country, send it medical supplies and give asylum to American draft dodgers, this was done from a position of pacifism. Sweden supported the Vietcong against the United
States. Yeah, because obviously they didn't send troops or anything like that, so it was just, obviously a more symbolic type of thing, but, still.
Pacifism. Sweden supported the Vietcong against the United States because it would have supported anyone in the same situation against any other great power, which was a position that Sweden would hold many more times throughout the Cold War. I hope you enjoyed this episode.
Alright guys, we're going to end another one. So yeah, another great History Matters episode explaining something that we obviously probably thinking in the back of our mind like, I wonder why. But in any case, so thank you guys again for joining me in another episode of Mike's Intellectual Corner. If you guys liked the episode, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. I'll see you guys in another one. I'm out. Peace.